Welcome everyone to episode 35 of the Coast AFL Podcast from Dick and Blaze. This week, as the title does suggest, we will be taking a preview look at the AFLW Finals. We will also be covering a couple of minor player movements that have happened recently in the off-season. A big landmark deal for North Melbourne and Western Australia, the McClelland medal, and Hawthorn also getting a brand new logo for their 100th anniversary in the VFL AFL for next season. So let's jump straight into it. How are you doing, Mr. Sarek?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, as I said, got to cap off the AFLW's season, going to Fremantle Oval again. Yeah, really good to see the win there. Wasn't too convincing, but, as I said, when you're in the finals, you can always just appreciate that. And yeah, got my ticket, I think about midday. They went on sale for members, so going to my first ever final, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, I could have gone to numerous others. The only one being that I didn't get to go to was 2014 because I couldn't quite get the ticket because I was busy. I think I had an exam on the day that they went on sale, so I couldn't exactly scour for them. 2014 obviously being Port versus Fremantle. It was at Fremantle. Great game, by the way. Let's say for Fremantle fans, but I'll always remember that final. But yeah, so glad to have that. Yeah, and just happy to be talking about a bit of football. And also, as probably is going to be mentioned soon, happy to check out some of your endeavors that you're doing.
Oh, yes, we will definitely touch on what I've been up to and what I will continue to be up to for all of November. I was going to go to the Richmond Hawthorn game that happened yesterday as of recording this on Sunday. Unfortunately, it was actually a sold-out game. Surprise, surprise. I could not get a ticket, not even a singular ticket, as a general admission. Like, they were just gone. Which I'm not surprised about. I mean, two teams in finals, one vying for top spot and or the McClelland Trophy. They got at least one of them. They didn't finish my own premiers, but they didn't finish top two, Hawthorn. And, up until three-quarter time, it was a pretty good close game to watch because I ended up watching it at home. We will talk about it again a bit more as we go into the preview for the finals. But yeah, that last quarter from Hawthorn was an absolute blitz, and our girls just ran out of legs. So congratulations to Hawthorn for beating us on home turf. But otherwise, my weekend's been, not too busy. The week that we had off hasn't been all too busy, mostly just been working. I did go up to Queensland. I don't know if I mentioned this the week before, but I went up to Queensland just for a mate's party. I had a few too many. It got a bit messy, is what it is. But it was a great time.
Oh, the follies of youth, Blazy.
I know.
Follies of youth.
Trust me, I surprisingly held my own, even though it was all coming back up. But actually, I just remembered that it is actually on this live screen that that we have put together. So if you look down below our webcams, you will see that there is a Movember logo and a QR code down there. That is because for this month, for all of November, I am raising money for Movember for men's mental health awareness and research. Mental health is a big thing in this day and age. It should always be a big thing. And our system definitely needs a lot of help. So I'm just doing my part after the system has helped me in recent times. So it felt right to give back, as I do with also my plasma donations that I do every 3 weeks. Speaking of, I have one coming up this week as well that I need to book in. But yes, it felt right to give back to a system that has helped me out a little bit. So that's what I'm doing for all of November. Maybe at the end of the podcast, I will go a little bit more in depth as to what exactly I'm doing over the month. But for now, let's jump straight into the AFL news because we have taken a week off. It's good to talk about the AFL again. So first news that we're going to start with is the sudden and retirement announcement of Jaidyn Stephenson, which happened earlier in the week.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of those things where, like the announcement, you wouldn't predict it. But you're not too surprised when it's come out.
Mm.
At first, it was initially stated that he'd just moved away from the game, and then he wrote another article, fairly decently written, about how he'd sort of lost his passion for the game, and decided that it wasn't really worth pursuing in terms of the balance for his life, plus what he wants to do for the club, because it's always that awkward position. Like, these players, they're all professionals. They want to do as much as they can for their club. But when that personal conflict sort of arises, it can be very difficult. So, first of all, I want to say, props to a brave decision, because it is hard. You train all your youth to get into the game. You think it's going to be, once you're in, you think it's going to be, oh, I need to just get as many games as I can. It's such a weird privilege being in the AFL. But, for a certain subset of players, it just doesn't happen like that. And yeah, he made the decision to move on from the game. As for his career, who can sort of forget the 2018 Rising Star campaign from Jaidyn Stephenson? It's one of those things where I guess it might be forgotten because Collingwood obviously didn't win the grand final that year. That was a premiership for the Eagles, unless I'm mistaken.
2018? Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, as I said, it would have been quite a story, his career, where he kicked 38 goals, 24 behinds, when Collingwood were probably starting to transition. I can't exactly remember the exact forward line movement, but I don't think they had many tolls. Will Hoskin Elliott had just joined the club. I think Myercheck might have been in his first year.
It was definitely Myercheck's early years.
Early days, anyway.
Yeah.
So they were just forming this young core, and a boy, he didn't capture this ever since, but in his first year, I think I already said 38 goals, but not only that, 75 tackles. Like, he was a forward pressure player, he was a distributor, very amazing, and then just sort of dropped off a bit. A bit was due to injury, and I think his form dropped off in 2020. I think he actually got dropped for a few games, fell a bit out of favour, and then obviously he had their big deal to go to the Kangaroos. Obviously they were looking to bolster their depth, but like with most clubs, sometimes you need to get those middle of the ground players. Sorry, like young players, but still a bit older than Fred, So yeah, went to the Kangaroos, a bit maligned. He was actually decent enough for his first couple of years. Well, especially more so 2021. Kicked just under a goal a game, had a bit of forward pressure. But yeah, as I said, since then, his career sort of, wasn't all too flash. I definitely didn't live up to the potential. Obviously, I don't really want to bring up such a such a low light, but unfortunately, the Buddy Franklin goal from his kick out when he was moved to defense in 2022 was probably the only highlight. It's one of my funniest. I think it's like one of the funniest moments of football. But that just happens in football. And as I said, it probably shows that he was sort of losing a bit, because he was frustrated. Because, sometimes, players make errors and you think it's because they don't care. But I think it's, when you are caring, but you just can't find that execution. I think that just sums up Jaidyn Stephenson's North Melbourne time to a T. As I said, I think sometimes players, it's very hard to comfortably say a player's like not trying hard enough unless you're in the coaching staff, unless you know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So I try to avoid it. But yeah, as I said, it just didn't work out for him. And, he just called time at 122 games. He was picked number 6 in the national draft by Collingwood. After, they went from nearly bottom 4 to the premiership. I think they just avoided it by winning like the last 6 games in that season or something like that. It was like 5 wins and a draw in the last half.
Yeah, it was really close.
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, they start off that season terribly, and then build it to the Collingwood we knew before they had another mini rebuild, and then as I said, got back to being relatively good. Still got to see for next year. As for North Melbourne, it's a bit of a hole to fill. They need to replace some run on the outside because whatever you can say about Jaidyn Stephenson, he was a hard runner and he was able to cover a lot of distance. They'll need to replace that. But yeah, it's about all I really got to say about Jaidyn. You got anything?
No, not really, to be honest. He's definitely one of those players that I feel like could have shone a lot brighter in a better system, like how Trelaw ended up doing when he went to the Doggies, after he got pushed, after
Yeah.
both him and Stevenson got pushed out of Collingwood due to their salary cap issues. Um, I think he definitely could have had a much longer career, and it's unfortunate that he's kind of fallen out of love with the game. But probably partially from being at North, but probably outside factors as well. Um, in terms of how they fill his void, I don't think the players that North have picked up in the trade period are going to do that. I think it's going to be someone that they pick up or in the actual draft, or someone that they already have that they're going to start to nurture to kind of fill his role. Like they could maybe push someone like Jackson Archer forward, for example, because they've got similar builds. But yeah, his pace and even his height, even though he's under 190 centimeters, he's got great hands as well. So it's like his ability to use the ball efficiently is definitely something that they're going to miss, and it's gonna be a hard void to fill considering we know how talented he is.
As I said, obviously his production didn't match his potential, but you still got to play, replace that sort of build, and that's not going to be too easy. I'm sure North Melbourne would have liked to have kept him. You don't want to get too much into sunk cost fallacy. But with a player like Stevenson, there's up and down players, that might be on the fringes. Like all you can do as a club is give him as much support as you can and hope for the best outcome. And we've seen, various times in the past, sometimes that's worked, whether it's, just due to off seasons, team troubles like Tyson Stengel, or even players like, I don't know, Daniel Pearce's time at Port versus at Fremantle. When he went to Fremantle, had a much more consistent role.
Mm-hmm.
He tended to play a lot better. He was actually one of the better wingmen in the comp. But yeah, as I said, that's just two examples off the top of my head. But yeah, didn't pan out. But as I said, 122 games in a great league of AFL football. We salute you.
And just to highlight the rest of his honors, so he did make the 22 under 22 team twice, in 2018 and in 2021. Obviously, he did win the AFL Rising Star in 2018 with a round 4 nomination, and he also won the Peter Scanlon Community Award at North Melbourne last year, 2023, for his charity work off field. So, very, very
Well, that's always
heartfelt
nice.
player. It's always very good to see.
Yeah, because obviously, when he was young, he obviously had that incident. I should mention 2019, he wasn't injured. I just remembered now. That was when he got suspended for 6 games for betting on his own match. So it was more stupidity rather than maliciousness.
That's right.
But, as I said, it's weird because obviously he wasn't quite as mature at that point of his life. I think he's gone on page and admitted that. But, it's very hard when you're that young, and to at least show some, evolution in his maturity.
Mhm.
Obviously, it didn't reflect on field, but that will set him up for life past football. And for him, that's what we wish him the best for.
Absolutely. All right. Next on the AFL agenda is Tim Membrey moving from St Kilda after getting delisted after being there since his initial signing to the AFL. No, actually, that's wrong because he played one. He was signed on originally with Sydney. And he played only one game at Sydney, and then he moved to St Kilda, where he's been with St Kilda for almost 10 years. Now has officially joined Collingwood on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, he was mid-round. Yeah, okay. He was pick number 46 in the 2012 draft. Just read that up. But yeah, as I said, ended up getting delisted there to join St Kilda, and he's one of the rare people to get delisted twice and still get picked up by a club. Yeah, actually, it's a bit of Freo news. That's a bit of news we might mention in a tiny bit. But yeah, as I said, so yeah, obviously for St Kilda, it's probably as good because I wouldn't say he's been a maligned player at St Kilda. He's just not as reliable due to injury as they might have wanted him to be when he was showing.
Not to interrupt,
that
but I
potential.
thought that this season was a little bit more consistent to what you would expect from Tim Membrey, but that's also partially because of King doing his ACL again, and they needing to have someone up forward, and him kind of being one of the only options.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess we'll talk about in terms of impact in teams for a second. But I think what you're saying is probably true to where St Kilda's actually going. The fact that they would move on from a pretty good year. But in terms of Collingwood, like this is much needed. I don't think Collingwood's looking to rebuild. Obviously, they have some quite big holes in their team, which we'll obviously talk about. But for such a low cost, they have a plug and play player. Obviously, he's used to a struggling forward line playing in there because St Kilda hasn't really had a great forward line for arguably since the Barry Hole days. So, or like the end of not Barry Hole. What am I thinking? Who am I thinking? Well, I guess Nick Rewalt, maybe.
Yeah, Rewalt.
Even 2011 wasn't that great, but
Rue, Joey, Del Santo kind of era.
Yeah, well, I said that was more midfield, sort of dominated more than forward line, but I guess they still had like Milne and all that. But anyway, we're getting a bit off topic. Yeah, the Saints haven't known offensive football for at least 10 years.
Yes.
That's pretty much the byline. So yeah, as I said, obviously accuracy is also another thing. He's had some of the funniest misses of the years. But as I said, top forwards get a bit like that. But yeah, no, I said I think he should be really good. I do want to hear your thoughts on, is this maybe a sign that St Kilda is committing to small ball a bit more? Because we saw at the end of 2024, and I know it's a bit, contradictory considering we said, oh yeah, Tim Membrey shone when King went down, but Tim Membrey pushed high a lot as well.
Yes, that's very true.
He wasn't just that, he wasn't that pinpoint forward like Max King was. Max King very rarely leaves the square. So he was almost sort of like tandeming with Wood when he would play a bit up. Yeah, and obviously Jack Higgins, he had a very fantastic last half of the year. We saw, Machida Owens, he was a bit down, but continued to get better at the last half. Filippo, there's another one that I always forget. But yeah.
There is another one, and I'm also blanking on said name, but I can picture the player. I hate when that happens.
So basically, it may be, it's a move that St Kilda delist because obviously they're going to be looking at, they can't continue this forward line trend for the next couple of years because it's not going to get into the finals because you can't have. Realistically,
they're not going to pull off like the kind of miracle run that they did in 23, where they actually made it to finals.
Yeah, well, even then it was a fairly like soft schedule as well. You know what I mean? Like they weren't convincing. But yeah, as I said, so they need to do something different. Especially, as we said, you can't just be like wasting such a great defense. Especially now that they've actually lost a player in battle. I think they'll be fine, but you know what I mean? Like, they've still got a lot of talent there, but they're just got to not waste it. They only need a bit of improvement to be like surprisingly threatening. So they're just gonna, and it's looking like they're gonna retool. They didn't make any big off-season moves in terms of forwards, so yeah, we'll just see what happens with them.
I definitely think that they're targeting a key forward in the draft very much, especially to someone to help King. Because if King goes down again, they're screwed. I think that with what their current forward line structure does look like, I think they are looking for more like a mosquito fleet kind of lineup, with King
Yeah,
kind of being the spearhead. Um, However, yeah, if King's injured again, that's not gonna work out all that well. They'd have to rely again on Mason Wood to try and do a lot of that heavy lifting if they can't get a key forward in the draft, or if they don't have anyone already in their stocks to be able to like train up.
yeah.
But as for
And the problem with
Collingwood,
that is,
oh no, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, like, Mason Wood, especially, like, we saw with his time in North Melbourne, like, he's not the key guy. Like, his output at North Melbourne heavily dropped when they lost Ben Brown,
Yeah,
first due to injury, and then
and then
due
to trade.
so much so that he got delisted, Mason Wood, from North Melbourne. So,
And it's not like I
um,
think that we think that Mason Wood is a bad player. I think he's very serviceable. In terms of what St
no.
Kilda
I'm
does
saying he's
need.
a great player,
Yeah,
but
agree.
it's because St Kilda found that role for him that wasn't just, playing to where he was struggling. They found a good role for him.
Yeah,
They used a lot of
he's
his
not a
strengths, and
he's not a deep forward because he doesn't have the height for it, but he does have the build to
yeah,
be able to play up, to play impacts, and
and he has a lot of
be very contested.
stamina on him as well. He runs quite hard.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, he is actually almost a two-way wingman, which for his, coming from a forward is very weird to be, but yeah. So I rated him fairly well last year. Yeah, above average wingman, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah. But yeah, in terms, St Kilda won't want to play him forward. They just got to find a new way to develop next year.
Agreed. And then in terms of Collingwood and what they get out of Tim Membrey is one really really good leadership skills because he's developed that in how what the 9-10 years that he's been at St Kilda, and the fact that he is a forward in a time where their forward line has struggled a fair bit in this past season, considering
Yeah.
the season before they did win the premiership.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously didn't win the premiership of offense, but it was a very much difference to where they were converting a lot when they needed to. Where you saw a lot of their rebounding attack tend to get stifled by pretty bad forward line. Obviously, the drop off of Ash Johnson, no one I think really saw coming. It was bad, unfortunately. So again, you're looking to not only did they sort of not quite get what they wanted out of Schultz. They also lost a few goals out of that. I really think that Myercheck struggled at times, partially due to injury, partially just because it's just a lot for a player like him. He normally relies on his smarts to take good marks, get goals. So, not only do you want, if he can get exactly the same amount of goals he got for St Kilda, which was, I think, 28, Collingwood will be a far better team already. But you might also see a bit of ums.
I think he got 30 in this past season, which I think was the highest, as high as Collingwood's leading goal kicker for last season, which was Bobby Hill at 30.
Yeah. I actually think, I think they're both 28. I think...
I know they're very close, or even. I just don't know what the exact number is. But yeah, it's like, if you're able to
You're right on that.
You just looked it up?
No. I remember talking about it back then. Because I was curious.
But yeah, so it's like, if they're able to get that same amount of consistency out of Membrey, as well as, being able to lift up, your Myerchecks, your Hoskin Elliots, your Hills, even allow... not I wouldn't say much the Dacos boys as much as they do a lot already, but like your DeGoes and your what's the other pretty boy? The one with the I can't say the one with all the tattoos because all of them have tattoos.
Yeah, I get you.
And
what are you talking about?
Jamie Elliott. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
And also having Membrey up there means that someone like Jeremy Howe doesn't have to push forward either. Howe can stay in his comfortable halfback role, and they don't have to have so many moving pieces, provided there's no injuries. God forbid.
Yeah, of course, but that was one of the things with Collingwood last year. They definitely didn't look meshed and they had multiple mini internal transitions throughout the year. So yeah, to be able to build a side for next year that has a set core, you know, it's so weird because, you know, as I said, it's coming only 2 years off a premiership.
Yeah.
And it's not like it fell apart. It's almost like the game sort of moved. But I guess that's a conversation for next year.
And it's not exactly like a mini rebuild. It's more like just a slight retooling.
Yeah. Oh, you would hope so.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
as a disliker of Collingwood, I don't hope so. But
Oh, yeah, would be pretty funny,
to put it in more favorable terms, yeah, it's probably more of a slight
Yeah.
retooling than like an actual rebuild already.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, as I said, I think there's an underrated humor to when like teams are like fairly competent but still stuff up, which is sort of the Malay that I wish on Collingwood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're generally going to be good. I respect the coaching stuff and all that, but you just hope that they stuff it up somehow. And last year's forward line was, I mean, it was funnier than St Kilda's forward line. Like, St Kilda was sad. I could laugh at Collingwood's forward line. I was just like sad at St Kilda. So, yeah, as I said, we'll see what happens. But yeah, Membrey's like a sensible pickup.
Yeah.
It's much better than the normal tactic of just like paying money out the wazoo for whoever.
Yeah, especially when you know he was delisted and they could get him for nothing.
Yeah, like it would be almost on rookie contract, really.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh,
yeah.
Well, yeah, because this initial signing is for 2 years, and then if he stays, it'll just go year by year because of his age.
Yeah, exactly. I just meant he won't be on much, so.
Yeah. And then I wasn't initially going to actually touch on this, but I did also want to briefly mention Jack Martin getting delisted by Carlton and then signed by Geelong for 2 years as a delisted free agent. We kind of discussed this in our AFL server, but he's pretty much mostly just a depth pickup, which isn't a bad thing. Like, we know he can be a great player as we've seen at Carlton, but I guess he didn't offer them enough to what they wanted. Plus, they had plenty of other players to kind of fill his sort of role.
Yeah, I think it was more so like they had a bit too much committed to players that were iffy in their own way in terms of small forwards to Carlton. And, you know, their list movement shows that they're trying to move on from that. You know, even being harsh on Matt Owies, who went to West Coast, you know what I mean? Like, he was the best of them, and he was still a bit inconsistent. Obviously, I've had players like Sam Durden, who got delisted. Sorry, not Sam, Corey.
Sam Durden's still there.
Yeah, Sam Durden plays, I think, in like the back line. Corey plays forward. Yeah. Oh, now I've completely blanked, but
there was another player.
Yeah, so Jack Martin going, you know, it's good for him because especially when you are so injury prone, you know, you just may think, oh, he's going into such a stacked forward line, why would you bother? But, you know, with that, it puts a lot of pressure off you, and then all you need to do is get your body right and believe in yourself. And if he gets in, they'll have a less significant drop-off than most teams if they lost any of their key forwards. And we all know his talent. Like, even at Carlton, he wasn't too bad when he could get on the park. This year, I would say not so much, but in other years, he has been actually pretty good.
Agreed.
But, you know, as I said, it's a big if on health. It would be surprising to see if he had any long-term impact. But I think Carlton, Geelong need is game-by-game impact. And, you know, he's got a few good games in him with his talent, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Especially, you know, knowing how Geelong recruit, knowing how Geelong build their lists, like, they're still well in contention. They have been for the past near 20 years with how they've constantly been able to restructure. Like,
some of the best list managements, like, sometimes I go back and like see some of the worst trade. You know, like, you look at list management history, and it's so rare to even get half the stuff that Geelong's gotten right. Like, this is, I would say, like, in any sport, I would say it's probably near the top level of recruitment that you can get.
But yeah, I only wanted to briefly touch on that. Let's jump over to our next bit of news, which actually kind of relates back to North Melbourne. where they have broken a landmark deal with WA, specifically with West Coast and Freo, not just the West Australian government, to host 2 home games over in the West for the next 3 seasons. That gives West Coast and Freo a little bit of alleviation in terms of their travel schedule. And it also brings in a little bit more money for North Melbourne themselves, as much as, I'm sure the players, don't really want to spend 2 weeks in WA because there's not much to do. But I'm sure that they will. Everyone
You're
knows
not
this is
getting
true.
invited by WA tourism.
But it's also in terms of the whole scope of the AFL, it's really, really good because it's also grow. Not that the game necessarily needs to be grown in WA because it is an AFL state, but it encourages possibly more memberships for North Melbourne themselves. Maybe it'll encourage other teams from out east to go over to the west to do something similar. Maybe it'll encourage the idea of gather round actually moving around rather than staying put in South Australia. Something like opening round, as much as we all despise it, unfortunately it is coming back. Maybe that gets moved over to like WA, or maybe it's like half out the west, half out the east for a future season, something like that. This idea is definitely a benefit to the AFL scope as a whole. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is with obviously Tasmania coming in, I know I'm not a huge fan of expanding further, but historically, no one's really been a fan of odd number teams in the AFL because always leads for the bye. So every week there's a team missing out and playing. And one of the areas that has been floated up is Bunbury.
Yes.
So this is actually almost a trial test as well. Because, for those who don't know, Bunbury is actually like the second biggest non-Perth region in WA. I'm just looking at the stats now. Apparently, of 2021, there's 76,000 people there. And, in other towns that are nearby, it's still fairly populated. You've got about a bit over 40,000 in Bustleton, which is about half an hour away. You got other developments being built there as well. So it's not unfeasible that they could get like a averaging 30,000 crowd from that area. Obviously, it's a bit of a pain to travel from Perth to there. I'm not sure how many fans they'll expect to make the journey on that initial game, but it's one of those things where if you can actually connect it with Transperth, well, actually, I'm not sure if Transperth own it, but anyway, the railway line that goes straight from Perth to Bunbury, if they're smart with that, maybe like open up some lines so that, on the trip down, they can pick up people along the way, because normally it's express from Perth to Bunbury. And if the AFL's smart, obviously this has to be a Saturday afternoon game, or sorry, afternoon for the East, middle of the day for WA.
Yep.
Because you encourage people to go there, hopefully spend a night for Bunbury, hopefully, get a hotel, have a relaxing drive back on Sunday. And I think they'll do well out of it. And yeah, as you mentioned, in terms of the, benefits for North, and Freo obviously begging after last year for a bit more fixture accommodation. Obviously West Coast too, but they had other problems that they were focused with. So as I said, it is going to be interesting to see if North will look to push much further, especially, considering they've lost. Well, both North and Hawthorn are going to lose a bit of Tasmanian identity, with the Tasmania team starting up. So whether they find other avenues to expand their locale or not, I don't think Bunbury's going to be in it, but it'll be interesting to see how North approach it.
Yep.
And yeah, as I said, for the Eagles and Dockers, it's what they've been looking out for. And, it also makes up, because you have Gather Round in Adelaide. You have opening round, apparently, it's going to be similar again from what we've heard in New South Wales
And in
this
Queensland.
year. Yeah, and Queensland. So it gives WA something as well, especially since Adelaide will be hiding tooth and nail to keep gather round for as long as they can.
Yeah.
And I don't think the AFL will go multiple gather rounds per year. I just can't see them doing that. So,
No, I don't think it'll happen either.
Yeah, this is at least a good stopgap solution, and exciting to see. I might try and make the trip down there, but that's very tentative.
Oh yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine it's going to be a little bit of a ball ache in terms of travel times
Yeah, because it's a
and
3-hour
financial
drive.
costs as well.
Yeah. I don't think the tickets are that expensive. Like, I think it's like 20 or so, but I mean, it depends. Like, you're going to pay over $20 in fuel, so obviously in that terms it's cheaper, but yeah. I'm not actually sure if it would be that much slower by train. I've never done it. I couldn't imagine it being longer than 4 hours. I think it would be almost the equivalent of something like New South Wales to like the outer regions of Newcastle, or even down south to the Illawarra region.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I can't think of like a Melbourne-esque type one because I haven't been to those outer suburbs. But
the best I could probably give you is if you go from Ballarat straight through the city out to Gippsland. Would probably be about a similar distance, because from Ballarat to the city it's about an hour and a half, at least by train. So it's probably similar if you go from like outer west to outer east, that sort of option.
Yeah. Melbourne's fairly condensed, so they don't have too many of those trips. But yeah, I think people tend to forget how massive WA is, and like although we've got a lot of low population areas, there are still some areas. Obviously up north would be the other area with like Broome and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah, like Broome.
I don't think the AFL would ever play there.
No,
like,
it's
you'll be getting
you're not going to get any crowds really.
35 to 38 games. Yeah, it wouldn't be fun. So yeah, the South just makes sense, and it will be interesting to see what they make of it. It's a good opportunity, and it's a good short-term solution, and I'm glad that the AFL can actually get together and organise this. And if they play their cards right, it could be a lot better than just on what, just solves a few problems.
Yeah, agreed. And this also like still coincides with North still playing games in Tasmania. They have not sacrificed the Tasmania alliance agreement just yet. Nor that I think that they will, even when Tassie does come in. I think them and Hawthorn will still be the two teams that go down to Tassie to play games there for the most part. Especially as Tasmania builds itself when it eventually does become introduced. But I think for at least the next 3 seasons, this is a genius idea, and I hope that some other teams can maybe be considered in the future to maybe make a mini gather round for this sort of thing.
Or even what you're saying, like with them still looking to have the Hawthorn North connection, to use this idea as, for clubs that do that, maybe it might be in the future North actually gets to play at Tasmania for a few extra. So then Tasmania gets to stay there, because obviously traveling is going to be a pain for them, because I know they say they're going to get direct flights, so I'm not sure if they'll have any 2 ways, but it's still going to be long for Tasmania to Perth. I mean, it's going to be for any team, but you know what I mean. So yeah, maybe they can use this to lay the grounds for some, I don't want to say concessions for Tasmania, but at least be proactive to some of the travelling struggles that they might have when they enter the
especially
league.
in their early years, because it's going to be a lot harder for, especially as they get all that young talent as well.
Exactly. If they can organise a few extra games, at the other stadiums, it should be good. So yeah. Oh, surprisingly, we're talking about the AFL organisation, and it's been positive, which is very rare on this podcast. But
I know
we'll give the AFL credit when it's due.
Yeah, sometimes they do come up with good ideas. Who knew? All right. Speaking of Hawthorn, actually, Hawthorn recently unveiled their 100th anniversary logo for entering the VFL AFL. And I like it. It's simple. It's retro, but it's also somewhat kind of modern in the same way, in that it's it's just very simple in design. Like, there's nothing very standoutish about it other than the letters being like weirdly jointed.
It does look very what do you call that? Obviously VFL, but you know what I mean? Like, it looks a bit more grassroots, which is always, sort of what you want to be aiming for.
It's like a logo that you would see for Box Hill rather than you would see for Hawthorn.
Yeah, exactly. I never got what, like, old clubs have this fascination of, like, stacking letters together. But you know what I mean? Like,
I don't get it either, but it does give off that retro sort of vibe, which is the whole idea of this.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, as I said, looks very pretty. And obviously, I think Hawthorn are taking this as a year to really ramp up the not so much club expectations, but obviously rank up memberships. For both, obviously, the AFL and the AFLW.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're going to talk a bit how Hawthorn are looking to be one of the teams to beat come the final season. So Hawthorn as a whole entity are looking to be very good. And, sort of, you couldn't ask for a better setup for their 100-year season. You can't obviously control the outcome, but in terms of the pure club financials, this will set up probably what will be at least financially great year for Hawthorn next year.
Absolutely, especially if both men's and the women's teams go on the absolute runs that they have in their respective seasons, of which everyone already knows about the miracle run that the men's team went through. Almost made it to a preliminary final after starting the season nearly like 0-5 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was 0-5
or like 1-5, something like that. I know
Brisbane... The first was their win against North.
Yeah, that's right. And then obviously the women's team finishing top 2, unfortunately getting a home final, which is very exciting for them. We're going to touch on that shortly. Quote unquote home final. It's not actually at their home ground. But there's a bunch of legalities and other stuff involved in terms of the AFLW structure, which we will talk about momentarily. Speaking of Hawthorn, let's see if you have anything else to say.
No, I was going to say this would be like an excellent lead up to a certain trophy.
Yes, it is. Which is,
I think you're on the
exactly where I'm going. Speaking of Hawthorn, thanks to the wondrous efforts of their men's team and their women's team, especially over the weekend against my girls, they have won the $1 million McClelland Trophy. It was pretty close overall, as they had only beaten, in the terms of the trophy standings, which I will actually show first, they managed to pip out Brisbane by 6 points, having less margin than Brisbane overall. Obviously, Brisbane, finishing near top of the ladder in the men's team. In the women's team, they also finished top 8. Both very successful teams currently, and therefore retaining a lot of premiership points in regards to that. However, Hawthorn managed to pip them out very, very close, after kicking three consecutive goals in the last quarter at Park Road Oval on Sunday, and beating out my girls by 23 points, and thus claiming the $1 million McClelland Trophy prize.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is sort of where some of the controversy might come into it. It's a bit of discussion how the McClelland Trophy should be figured out, because obviously, as good as Hawthorn were, Starcevic came out and said, I think there should be consideration, considering how much of our game is focused on finals, to include the finals fixture, to where obviously Brisbane would have got a few extra victories. But, as I said, there's a few problems that come with that. One is that Brisbane's run include an extra game.
Yes.
That, if it was Sydney who won it, they wouldn't have that.
Because it's also the fact that the men's have a longer season, which is why the women's premiership points equate to more. because
Yeah,
otherwise it just
it's
wouldn't match up properly.
yeah, pretty much. Like, well, basically they avoid using decimals, but they just scale the numbers. So I think it's like the women's get like it's like 20. So I can't do the math, but it's like 2 and a bit to 1.
Yeah, it's
point.
rather than the men's getting 4 premiership points on a win, the women's get like 8 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, oh wait, no, I've got it here. A win for the AFLW is 8, and the AFL men's is
There we
4.
go. Yep.
2 for a draw. So it's literally just double. Yeah, so but I do understand the pains for that because, you know, especially the only downside I would say of doing the McClelland that way, I'll say personally, I think it just should be regular season.
I'm fine with it being
But,
regular
you know,
season. I think it makes a lot of sense to be regular season because again, finals is just a whole different kettle of fish, like it always has been.
yeah. But, you know, obviously the drawback of that is, you know, with how short the women's season is, like you're going to see a club missing out on a fairly big amount of money. You know, just, you know, for the difference could just be like a key injury or a bad umpiring decision. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about a literal game coming down to decide it. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe they want to like, I don't want to say like lower the pool money, but you know, the only other way I could see it is actually just separating the men's and the women's. But obviously, well, not so much that. I don't know. Maybe they shouldn't do anything. I don't really think they need to, but yeah, as I said, I should say for the funding, it's not just a straight $1 million given.
It's
If
divided
I recall
into
correctly,
4 parts.
quarters basically. So the men's will get $25,000.
$250,000. There's an extra zero
Well,
there.
yeah. Same with the women's, and then the staff will get the same, and then as an organization, they just get the rest of the money.
Yes, and the assumption would be that like the
anything.
organization itself that would go into, you know, like the grounds themselves, equipment,
Grounds,
stuff like that.
fundraising, exactly. I mean, even like external staffing, you know what I mean, like venues and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That
Like
actually,
if they want to host any
that.
events outside of their own
Yeah,
grounds
exactly.
or stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so yeah, Hawthorn, they win that. They'll be very happy. It's not like they don't deserve it. Again, coasting off some pretty nice AFLW women's. Because yeah, as I said, as good as the men's were, they did provide a bit more losses at the start of the season. But you know, at least you know the way the McClelland is, you know, at least it gives teams incentive to play out the season as much as they can. Because you know, even like for the dead rubbers, like there's a few other ones like, oh, I don't know. I was gonna say I don't think there's any examples, but yeah, like I said, I mean even Richmond, like you know, they're going to be a powerhouse maybe in a couple of years, I think. So you know,
the women's side at least. The men's,
yeah, the women's side, so for the men's, if they can notch, you know, 6 or 7 wins, you know, they might be able to help put them in contention.
We're working on it. Give us some time.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's a bit unfair for the Kangaroos because, like, they literally went undefeated for the season.
Yeah, their women's side is literally the best in the league, but the men's side is literally the complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and look, but yeah, as I said, to be honest, I don't mind them working this out for the next few years because I don't actually think the schedule's very... not schedule, the team allocation, expansion allocation of talent was that greatly handled.
Yeah.
North ended up bankrolling a lot of teams. The people they were able to get is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, as I said, we'll talk about it soon. They're shaping to be like almost... You've got to put in more than 3-1 odds to win the whole thing. I'm not a betting person myself, but you know, we're talking like you'd almost expect them to win.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying that you know, I will go through it in a bit, but yeah, they've just got so much talent at that club.
So if anyone is actually interested in the total standings of the McClelland Trophy, the order is Hawthorn, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, Fremantle, Adelaide Crows, Essendon, Geelong, the Kangaroos, Sydney Swans, Melbourne, the Western Bulldogs, Carlton, St Kilda, GWS, Collingwood, Richmond, the Gold Coast Suns, and the West Coast Eagles. And in saying that, I am actually going to bring up the ladder for the AFLW and and the men's side as well. Why not? Just this is as a reminder to how the teams ended up in the situation that they are in. Let me find the ladder because I cannot find it for the life of me right now. Give me 1 second. Okay, so that's the men's.
It's a tab on the top left.
Oh yeah, I found it. That's all good. And then and I'll just bring that up again, and then I'll move that to the AFLW champion. There we go. Okay, so just as a friendly reminder to where we finished last season, or this season, I should say, the top 8, the 18 in order for the men's team was Sydney, Port Adelaide, Geelong, GWS, Brisbane, the Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn, Carlton, Collingwood, Fremantle, Essendon, St Kilda, Gold Coast Suns, Melbourne, Adelaide Crows, West Coast Eagles, North Melbourne, and Richmond. And for the women's team, as we now move our way into our finals preview, the 18 is North Melbourne, Hawthorn, Brisbane, Adelaide Crows, Fremantle, Port Adelaide, Richmond, and Essendon in the top 8. And Melbourne, Geelong, St Kilda, Western Bulldogs, West Coast Eagles, Carlton, Sydney, GWS, Gold Coast Suns, and Collingwood rounding out the 18.
Mm-hmm.
So let us move into our grand finals previews themselves, starting off with the path to the premiership graphic. So as you can see, it is the matchups are between North Melbourne and the Adelaide Crows, Freo and Essendon, Port Adelaide and Richmond, and Hawthorn and the Brisbane Lions.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, exactly. And it was almost pretty much set from the get-go. Unfortunately, week 10, there was a few teams not wanting to muck around with their positionings. There was a lot of floggings, especially when Geelong unfortunately lost a nail bite at Adelaide. They got a 4-goal lead at halftime, but proceeded to not score one since. That got their Narrows chances to make finals eliminated, and then the top 8 was pretty much set from there. And the only other game where there was a possibility of some movement was, of course, the one you talked about earlier, Hawthorn on Richmond. Richmond put on a pretty good effort for half of the match, but Hawthorn ran away with it.
I did.
Richmond, we'll talk about it in a bit, but they've had a few injuries. I think in another season where they've maybe had a bit more luck as some of the top teams, because we'll mention in a bit, the top 3 teams are almost clean slate in terms of injuries. Richmond unfortunately had a few ACL injuries. I did make a joke that they could win the McClelland, trophy for knee injuries through the year. I'm not sure if Blazy appreciates that joke, but
I kind of appreciate the joke because it is funny, just to laugh at the injuries that we've had throughout this year. But it's also it's also pretty sad at the same time because of how many ACLs, especially.
Because I think the women's have 4 ACLs.
I think we had
ACLs.
I think we had like 6 overall.
Had 5
or
6, yeah. And that's not like including the other ones like MCL or
not
just
including
knee
Dion
ligament.
Presti's hamstrings.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of connected to the knee, but So as I said, Richmond have been fairly unlucky, and then of course the best game of AFLW for the round, Port Adelaide playing as Yardapulti against GWS at Albert Oval. Massive crowd, 40,000 there. I watched the first half. I went to the Freo game. I
Mhm.
was watching it on my phone because I had some time to spare, and they just looked completely out of it. They weren't getting any forward function. The Giants were tackling the hell out of them, and I was just like, "Oh yeah, it's a bit disappointing that they don't see them stuff up before the big stage, because this was for a home final."
Mhm.
And then, I get to the game, and my phone must have had a bit of an error because when I looked at it, I think it said full time, 6-1 to 6-6, and I was like, oh, they came back, but didn't come close. Just fell short. And then, I was talking about it with the family at dinner. I went back to Sunday dinner with my family after I finished the game, and they were like, oh, here's Fremantle playing. And then I just looked up my phone and I was like, oh, Essendon. And I was just like, Essendon? And turns out, Gemma Houghton, not quite kick after the siren, but very close to the end of the game, kicked the game-winning goal for Port Adelaide to get them a victory over GWS, and got them a home final, which is absolutely great because there are only 4 Victorian teams in the finals, and
And none of them are versing
both
each other, which is very interesting.
none of them are versing each other, and 2 of them are having to play away. As I said, my condolences to Richmond. I think that their year campaign definitely definitely a bit unlucky. They're pretty much the equivalent of a top 4 team. I think Fremantle and Port Adelaide aren't quite as good as them, but we'll get to that when we go up to the matchups. And
Yes.
the first one
The first
we'll
one
talk about.
is a qualifier final between North Melbourne and the Adelaide Crows being played at Icon Park, Carlton's home ground. There's a reason for this is because it's the biggest suburban home ground that we have in Victoria. Also because some of the other home grounds like Punt Road and I think like St Kilda's home ground as well is doing a bit of renovation work. Obviously, people are
Yeah, because when
aware.
you told me, yeah, Punt Road was sold out, I was like, oh, that's why they only had 2,000,
Yeah, but that's also
in the
because
renovations.
they're now going to be starting preliminary works on making it bigger. There was a report earlier in the year, I believe we discussed it, that
Hmm.
Punt Road Oval is going to be turned into like a bigger, like kind of mini home ground for Richmond for some home games
Hmm.
instead of just playing at the MCG. It's also going to be a better facility for our women's team as well. Um, I think we might even be trying to accommodate our wheelchair team, who have been very successful
Yeah,
over the past couple of years, which would be very cool.
nice.
Um, that part I don't actually know the confirmation of, but essentially it's going to be a much better facility. It's going to become again like a mini MCG to some degree, where we're able to have home ground games for both the men's and more for the women's. But that will take a couple of years to fully develop, um, which is why a lot of our home games now are going into like the next AFLW season and probably our VFL team games as well will all be played at Carlton's home ground mostly. Or we might play games down in Casey or in Box Hill or Moorabbin or wherever. Um, but yeah, so some Victorian teams are currently going through renovations. That's why Icon Park is going to be the home for the women's teams and for the VFL teams for a while.
Yep, absolutely.
So again, our
Um,
first game is North Melbourne and Adelaide at Icon Park.
yeah, and if you haven't been following the AFLW, like this is historically a pretty close matchup for both teams. And then again this year, where Adelaide just lost out to them 4-9 to 6-5, bit of inaccurate kicking by them. But the other games in the prelim last year was 32 to 31, and in their first ever matchup, it was 41 to 38 in favour of Adelaide. So North Melbourne had the last 2 encounters. It's going to be very hard not to tip them by the sheer A, amount of talent they have, and B, just because Adelaide, the last couple of weeks, have looked a bit iffy. They took a lot to get going against Geelong, and they had that upset against Melbourne. Um, but Adelaide just so experienced. They have so much talent. They have arguably the best player in the league in Evany Marinoff. They have one of the better goal kickers in the league with Evie Gould. I can't remember her first name. Um, And then, there's got some plenty of other talent like Hatchard, Randall? Randall, yeah. Yeah, I always get Randall and Liddell mixed up, but
Understandable.
yeah. So, yeah. So, a lot of talent. Adelaide, they've got a very complete team, but unfortunately, they're probably playing the most complete team in North Melbourne. So, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for them. You expect North Melbourne to win this, but of all the teams to beat North, I think Adelaide's got to be the favourites. And I think they'll be liking getting this matchup early because they get to play their heart out. It'll be massive if they win. They get to the prelims. And if they don't, they still have a path to the finals to where they might, face them. Or alternatively, North get knocked out in the prelims and they don't have to face them. I'd be very surprised if that happens, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, it's a great way to kick off the round. If you're in Melbourne and, I'm not sure how many tickets are going to be allocated to this game. But yeah, as I said, definitely worth giving it a check out because, historically, although low scoring, very intense matches by these two. I remember the prelim last year being very solid. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, going by, I had a look at some of the average statistics between both teams. It definitely looks fairly evenly matched. I haven't watched much of the AFLW at all, so I don't know entirely one-on-one statistics between players. But direct matchups team-wise, they definitely look fairly even in terms of just raw numbers. Even though it is, one first to fourth, with Adelaide having 3 losses under their belt, and North haven't lost a single game yet this season. They've drawn once, but they have been completely full of wins this entire season, which is very impressive. But again, as you said earlier, they're completely stacked for talent, and again are expected to run away with this victory with the premiership.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Let's put it this way. In terms of goal leaders, North Melbourne, surprisingly, for a percentage of 300, they only have one person in the top 5, and that's Elise O'Loughlin with 1.4.
is that their key forward, I would assume?
Yeah.
A Nick Larkin sort of role?
I guess so. Honestly, I've only watched a few North Melbourne, but basically they've got 2 people. Oh, sorry, no. Let's see. Yeah, they've only got one. They've got one at Oh, sorry, I've got games. No wonder it's looking a bit funny. Yeah, so they've got yeah. So they've got Elise O'Loughlin and Kate Sheelaw, both with the highest average per round. Elise O'Loughlin has just played another game than Kate Sheelaw. So she's in the top 5. But when you look at goal assists, Talia Randall for them averages 1 goal assist per game. So, they're very spread. Whereas Adelaide rely a lot on Caitlin Gould and some of their midfielders as well. Hatchard gets a few goals per game. She pushes up forward and as well as a very good midfielder. So Adelaide, by design are a lot, less forward line predominant, but have so much evenness in the back half. They've got a lot of fantastic midfielders, and as I said, if LA can get the game to be defensive, they should have a good chance. If North Melbourne, get a bit of a roll on, as we've seen, they're almost impossible. They've given absolutely nothing to anyone in the bottom. They, normally see, one of these big teams, they normally. And I guess you can argue it was the game against Jeddah West where they drew. But against every other bottom team, they've absolutely obliterated them. Scorelines of 70-10. If you let them go, they've just got so much dangerous, very forward of the ball team, midfield upwards. But, don't say that they can't defend or anything, because in the top games they have, reasonably held their own. As I said, they're a complete team, but they're definitely a lot more dangerous up forward. So Adelaide, if they can be disciplined, bring it to a low-scoring game, should be a cracker. But yeah, North Melbourne just got that dangerous edge to them.
Sounds like it's going to be one hell of a game. And
Hopefully, yeah.
being a Friday night, you expect possibly a big crowd. Being
Yeah,
also
sure,
first
yeah.
game of the finals.
Yeah, exactly. I would say, like, about crowds, it's actually almost probably a good thing there isn't as many Melbourne teams because, like, I know it's not entirely Melbourne teams' fault. I think this year some of the stadium renovations have sort of halted crowds a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think we've seen a lot of the Melbourne crowds be a bit disappointing, you know, being the mid to low 2000s, even dipped for a few of them, depending on where they were in the ladder. Obviously, Collingwood and Carlton have struggled sometimes with numbers, St Kilda as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot for, you know, states that aren't interested in football. We've seen some absolutely fantastic crowds in Sydney, despite, you know, both teams being in the bottom four for the W. You know, almost, I think it was like 3,600 rocked up to see the Eagles. Sydney play the Eagles, or
Yeah.
Wally at Malawa, as they were that round, which was absolutely fantastic for a complete dead rubber. So I will say, like,
I definitely
yeah,
think that part of that contributes to the growth of the men's scene in New South Wales for both Sydney and GWS for that fact. Because
yeah,
you know, Sydney's massive rise throughout this season, although they've always been like a big team. That's the whole reason why they went up there in the first place, apart from, you know, having to save themselves to survive. You know, they've been a part of this massive growth in New South Wales, and especially this season as they played some fantastic games. We remember not that long ago the qualifying final against GWS was absolutely massive, and yeah, I definitely think that the women's team getting significantly bigger crowds than some of the teams in Victoria has definitely contributed because of the growth of the men's teams as well.
I said that for GWS. I actually think Sydney is like one of the best teams in growing their fan base, like purely in terms of W. Like, as I said, the stuff they've done for Pride Round, when I've seen them play against Fremantle, they're one of the few teams to actually have a bit of a, like, an organized WA cheer squad. Yeah, as I said, I think, you know, and I think Sydney have done a fantastic job with their women's program, despite the disappointment this year. But GWS, unfortunately, they're the Gold Coast of the women's football, to put it nicely.
Apart from the Gold Coast Suns themselves.
Yeah, well, the Gold Coast women's, you know, to compare them to the Gold Coast men's, probably doing a bit of a disservice. So
that's fair enough. That's a fair assessment.
I say that when they only won 1.5 games, but honestly.
Yeah. Right, let's move on now to our first elimination final game between Fremantle and Essendon, or Walyalup, as considering it is still technically the Indigenous rounds before going into finals.
Yeah.
At Fremantle Oval, out in the west.
Yes. Obviously, again, absolutely fantastic venue. Honestly, the stadium's not terrific, but in terms of atmosphere, I've absolutely enjoyed going down there for games. Fremantle's terrific. You go to the markets, you bring some food into the ground. I always get like a small bag of popcorn, which it says small, but it like feeds 1.5 people, and I eat all of it in like 2 quarters.
Clearly, you must be 1.5 people.
Maybe. But yes, so Fremantle, I've told you a bit about them because obviously it's a team I know a lot about. And I've mentioned before, I don't think they're going to be a team that goes deep into this finals. But they are a team with a lot of strengths, especially with their backline. They've been absolutely fantastic. Ash Brazel, the netballer, used to play for Collingwood, had an AA season there a few years ago, then made the switch over to Fremantle. And 1 year in the league, I didn't watch much of her before that, and I can see where all the talent is. Absolutely fantastic. We've had the rise of someone you may know if you follow the AFL, MRA Driscoll,
Mhm.
Driscoll or Driscoll, depending. Yeah, one of the worst ball drops in the league. But an absolutely fantastic intercept defender. And yeah, Fremantle, their season, they've been pretty solid. They won all their games away. They lost 3 games at home, which is a bit weird, but yeah, 3 games at home. But obviously, a lot of their harder games did end up happening at Fremantle Oval,
Mhm.
which you can argue is lucky or unlucky, depending on how you want to look at it. Because, yeah, as I said, I don't think they're at a level where they could ever pull off a win against teams like Hawthorn or Adelaide, who beat them away from home. But at the same time, they were able to go undefeated away because they had a pretty soft draw with that, which propelled them into 5th and even a chance of getting 4th. So, yeah, as I said, and they, as Wally up against the Western Bulldogs, did what they needed to. Again, their one biggest bane is their forward 50 entries. Unfortunately, losing Anya Teague, at the start of the year with an ACL, really disappointing. Filled her shoes with young talent called Kickerwack and a few others. But yeah, they're mainly a back half team. They run the ball quite well off defense. But in a contested game, they tend to only be able to lock teams in, which can lead to a few stalemates. But hopefully against a team like Essendon, who's had a pretty decent year considering. A few injuries, young team. So, it might be fortuitous that they're in the finals at 8th, considering that they haven't had a win against a top 8 team as it sits currently.
Mhm.
Currently, as it will sit. But, as I said, they got the wins when they needed to, finished with fairly solid percentage. And unfortunately, as we head into the injury news, they have lost Bonnie Toogood for the remainder of the finals, which is one of their star players. And they've, had, I know one of their other injuries is a fairly decent player. But yeah, as I said, I'm not too knowledge on Essendon as a team. But obviously, not Georgie Prasparkas. Who's the other Prasparkas? The one that plays for Essendon anyway. Yeah, as a forward line. She's done a lot of heavy lifting for the team.
Mhm.
She is very strong forward threat. And yeah, honestly, I can't really tell you anything too much about Essendon. Madison Prasparkas. Sorry, I just looked that up.
Oh, that's okay.
Also, yeah, Georgia Nanskuan is a player that I think almost leads the league in clearances or something. 6.3 a game. Fantastic inside player.
That's very impressive,
If you're
actually.
watching, yeah, very solid redhead. Few solid good redheads in the league. I think that's what the AFL men's is missing. Like, you got a few decent ones, but the AFLW is a fair few talented redheads there. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm just stalling because I got not much clue about Essendon.
No, you're good.
But yeah, I expect Fremantle to win, even though they're not the most solid team. They've normally been pretty good, except for that one random blip against Carlton, which, yeah, in hindsight really hurt because it could have got them 4th spot. But it is what it is. They've been fairly consistent with what they do. They just need to make sure they don't blow too many inside 50s.
Sounds good. All right. Next on our list is the next qualifying final against Hawthorn and Brisbane, also held at Icon Park.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because Brisbane, a very solid season. But yeah, they're another team that pretty lucky, not too many games against top teams. I think they only had 2 games with teams in the top 8, which I think is the bare minimum when you think about it. But yeah, but again, very solid team. Pretty well rounded as well. Got some really good forwards and some great defenders. Again, I must admit, I haven't watched too many Brisbane games either. But Hawthorn, I have watched a fair bit. They're probably the closest parallel wise to their men's team, I would actually say.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what
they're
I
very
thought when I watched the game on Sunday. Is the way that they play is extremely similar to the game style that the men's have, which makes it incredibly interesting to watch.
Yeah, honestly, I think they are the most watchable team in the league. But yeah, as I said, the way they position from their back line, um, names are escaping me, but basically they've got like a very solid intercept defender. Do their role, intercept as much as they can, pass it to some of their better halfbackers. For Hawthorn, that's probably all Australian Tilly Lucas Rod.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a wonderful year this year in the back line, and have opened up some very explosive plays from the midfield to the forward line. And yeah, absolutely a joy to watch. Honestly, I know the percentage is a fair bit different between the Kangaroos and Hawthorn. But I would say those two teams are by far the best offenses in the AFLW today. It's very harsh, not including Brisbane and Adelaide, but the games that Hawthorn have had to do this year, I think they've proved their medals against some pretty good opposition. And, every game that I've watched them against tough opposition, they've always found a way to implement their own game plan. And when your game plan is run and gun, and especially in because we all know women's football, sometimes space isn't exactly afforded to them. Teams have the luxury of clamping down a bit more, obviously, with the 10 meters lost. On average, on every kick. I know some women who have played around, you're only looking at a loss of 5 meters sometimes. But, when it's the average, effective positioning, it allows for teams to lock you down. But the way Hawthorn's able to get around that, generate space, not only from intercept, but general play and good clearance work, sets them up to be very dangerous. I would say, honestly, Kangaroos and Hawthorn are just a bit above every other team in the league. I would put them comfortably against Brisbane, but do not discount Brisbane. They're a veteran team. They know how to win it. One of the best coaches in the AFLW. Again, these two preliminary matches, I wouldn't be surprised if they're matchups we see again. I wouldn't be surprised if all those teams still made it to the prelims. But, as I said, just, those four teams, if you're going to watch any teams these AFLW, and, I watch all of them, you know what I mean? But, those teams, especially for our Melbourne listeners, play some really good football. And it'll be interesting to see if in finals, like we've seen in the men's, that attacking brand of football will actually play out. And, maybe the more offensive wins, just like in the men's, the offensive teams, like in the men's, finish off strong and win it all.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing that I definitely did observe when watching the Sunday game against my girls is that, again, they are very, very strong offensively, but they are also one of the best defensive teams in the league, just judging by their general structure. Granted, my girls are no slouches either. We will touch on that in a minute. But the way that Hawthorn was able to transition from half-back directly into their forward line and able to kick 3 straight, especially in that last quarter, was incredible to watch. And it's definitely the same kind of structure that the men's team currently have. And knowing the pieces that the men's team currently has going into next season, it's definitely going to be a sort of good balance between both teams as to learning from each other, as considering they play similar styles, as to how to continually bolster their own structure in terms of attacking play.
Yeah, exactly. And I do actually want to look up, because I feel bad for because I looked it all up before, because I'm terrible with the women's names. I haven't quite got it into my head yet. But as I said, to give you some names, Ainsley Kemp is essentially your probably your James Sicily for the women's team. Laura, I think Jenna Richardson, plays more of a scrimshaw type role. And then you got Laura Elliott and Tilly Lucas Rod, who play rebounding off half back whether you want to say it as like I mean, honestly, Tilly Lucas Rod could probably be like who was that like defender winger from the
D'Ambrosio.
D'Ambrosio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like she's got a good speed, good distribution, and especially when the wingers are too good. Caitlin Ashmore, Greta Bodie, as I said. As I said, that again, Hawthorn, as I said, I say that, I think, in terms of complete teams, I will say this. I think Brisbane are. Granted, I will say Brisbane did beat Hawthorn earlier in the season, so they've got that going for them. But I think Adelaide North and Hawthorn have the most complete teams of the teams in the final series.
Okay.
Yeah. Just from what, again, I might be a bit biased. I've only watched certain games. I haven't got to watch Brisbane too much this year. And obviously Brisbane being so historically good has sort of lifted my expectations at times of them. But I think Brisbane at times have been more not so much well coached, but they've definitely had a few. I don't know. It's just harder to judge them because they haven't had as hard a schedule.
Yeah,
but,
that's fair.
That's the quick the AFLW for you.
But yeah, if you're familiar at all with kind of Brisbane's history with the AFLW, they are considered one of the best teams in the comp. Over pretty much throughout the entire existence of the AFLW.
Yeah, Brisbane and Adelaide both have 3 premierships.
Yes,
I think.
I believe that to be the case off the top of my head. Do you want to quickly confirm that for me?
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, like as they got very lucky coming in early, being able to have that experience early on, and being able to grow naturally as a team throughout those early years, as well as obviously have already immediately having a bunch of incredible talent. Hawthorn having only recently come in the past couple of years, obviously had to kind of manufacturally grow. I don't know what the word is for it. Artificially grow, I guess, their team from having to take from other teams and go directly into the draft, stuff like that. But again, like they're coached like pretty much a very similar way to how the men's and the VFL team are coached, and as you said, that's what makes them exciting. That's what made the men's team exciting. And
yeah,
if they're able to take the fight to some of these historically better teams, like your Brisbane's, like your North Melbourne's, they definitely could put up a massive fight for the premiership.
Yeah, as I said, maybe I saw it a bit too much into the hype, but I really believe Hawthorn have a fair shake to win the premiership just as much as North Melbourne can. When you're talking about half a game, I know North Melbourne undefeated, but as I said, pretty small margins.
And a draw shows that they can be weak. That they can be weak at times. You can exploit that.
Yeah. Well, as I said, technically, if you're looking at the only blips, as I said, North Melbourne randomly lost to GWS, whereas, Hawthorn lost to Brisbane, who were, again, third on the... Wait, third? Yeah, third on the premiership table.
Yeah, second versus third.
Yeah. So I was right or wrong. I remember, Brisbane are 2-3 in terms of their finals. They've won 2, lost 3.
Okay.
So they've been in the most AFLW grand finals. Over half. In fact, there's only 2 that don't visit Brisbane, which is crazy.
Well, yeah, because the AFLW has only existed for 7 years. Like the
7 years,
VFLW,
but there was one double.
The VFLW has existed for a bit longer. Similar to how they're going to introduce Tasmania. They're going to start with like a VFL side and then go into the full national competition. But yeah, they've got a ton of experience, the Brisbane team, and they're very scary going into this finals campaign. All right, let's move on to the last elimination final. One against both of our teams, technically. Port Adelaide or Yatapulti against Richmond at Alberton Oval over in South Australia.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to say, even though, obviously, I do still fully support Fremantle. Fremantle did have a game against Port earlier in the season down at Alberton. I was cheering for Freo. But Port, I do have a lot of love for. I've been following them this year, especially since they've been a lot more competitive. They've probably been the biggest upswing In fact, I think they're the only team to really have the upswing. I think Hawthorn were half decent last year, and Essendon, but Port sort of came up from pretty much I think only a 3-win season last year. So a bit unexpected to make the 8, but they did, and not only that, they managed to get the home final. Again, arguably a softer schedule. Obviously with the AFLW, there's only so many teams that do get hard schedules.
Mhm.
But yeah, Port, to their credit, have made the most of it. And honestly, considering, again, they're a team with a few injury concerns, obviously losing their captain, Beth I need to look it up because I can never get the game right. Janelle Cuthbertson.
That's a very complicated last
Earlier
name.
in the season. Their captain. The honours, I think, went down to Ashley Saint, who did an absolutely fantastic job this season. And both Julia Teakle for passing the season, and Indy Tauho, which was, I'm pretty sure, a up-and-coming young player that they were very keen on. So they had a lot of struggles this year and generally managed to come out on top, especially their run. Because they didn't lose against Jerry West. Yeah, it was a 6-round win streak. I think most in the, well, not most, but the second most in the AFL, considering that obviously North, didn't lose. I'm actually not sure. Can't remember when Hawthorn and Brisbane first played, but anyway, technically one of the more formed teams in the comp, and very exciting. They're honestly, for young teams playing football, I think, with maybe they don't always get the execution right, but they're very exciting, and I want to see more of them in the future. I think the top 3 would probably be Yards Butty / Port Adelaide, Richmond, and Woolwich Maroowa / the West Coast Eagles. Well, especially the Eagles, they were very exciting. Their just execution is very poor. Their list isn't quite to where their game plan is, but I like what Daisy Pearce is doing with them. But yeah, as I said, Port Adelaide, one of the faster teams in the competition. Occasionally, as I said, sometimes struggle a bit up forward. But because their defense has lifted up a bit, a few players, as I said, I think Ash Saint plays, very solid in defense, especially since Janelle Cuthbertson went down. She's a back woman back there. Ash Saint's a forward. Ebony O'Day, she's the one that really lifted now. Yeah.
Okay.
A journeywoman player, played for multiple teams, found a way at Port, and is honestly fringe All-Australian for this year. Brooksby had a pretty great year down back. Honestly, it's going to be interesting, this one, because Port Adelaide did get the win against Richmond earlier in the season.
They did.
But in terms of the way it's sort of...
no, actually, they didn't. Richmond got the win.
Oh, sorry. No, they didn't. Richmond got the win. That was before they got their streak on. Now I'm remembering. But honestly, again, Richmond were nearly at full tilt. That, I think, that before they lost a few players. But in terms of where they are now, it's actually pretty even. It should be a pretty exciting elimination competition. Because despite obviously Richmond struggling a bit at the back end, don't be fooled, they've still got a lot of talent. They've obviously got Monconti, one of the best players in the league at the moment. Yeah, Western Ferris winner. Norm Smith winner for the Bulldogs. Back in 2018, I think.
18, 19, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously Katie Brennan, absolutely fantastic player. Also,
we've got Tom
Sarah Hosking.
She's currently out with injury, which is not very helpful.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's who they lost. Greiser.
Greiser is very good. She's very strong-bodied. Yeah. I believe she plays forward off the top of my head.
I thought that was the player you were going to say is Tom Lynch.
No, I was gonna say we've got Tom Lynch's sister up forward,
Oh,
and
do you?
she's got a beautiful kick. She played her 50th game on Sunday, and she scored a goal,
Okay.
and it was very lovely to see. But yeah, she's got a beautiful kick like her brother. I don't think she
Yeah.
doesn't have the
I
height
like the
like her
height
brother.
looking at her.
She's
Yeah.
a much shorter forward.
166 as a halfback or forward. I'm
Yeah,
assuming she's moved up.
uh,
I'm looking at the old Richmond vs Port
I think
Adelaide.
she's like a swing woman. But
Yeah.
she's very very fun to watch from the minutes that I have watched her. Greiser, very strong bodied back woman, or I think she's back woman. I can't remember, but she's very good at tackling. She's very strong tackling pressure. Sarah Hosking is the same as well. Unfortunately, she is injured, so it doesn't bode well for us going into the final series. I
And
think it's what we lost, mostly against
also
Hawthorn.
going back, now that I've remembered, to the Redheads before, Grace Egan.
Grace Egan, very lovely as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the draw against Essendon during Dreamtime hampered things a little bit. The loss to Melbourne and obviously the loss to Hawthorn definitely hasn't really helped our chances in terms of finding a good stride going into finals. However, I think the girls are up for the challenge up against Port Adelaide. Do I think we'll make it out of Port Adelaide alive? Remains to be seen, but I think we'll definitely put up a strong challenge. And I hope the girls win. If I've got the time, I'm definitely going to watch the game. But
I think on paper it will be the closest game, in my opinion. And I know North and Adelaide should, but I can imagine scenarios where that could be a blowout. Where, as I said, just due to injuries, like as I said, I think on paper, and for what Richmond want to do for the future, they just want to get the finals win because I think it's not really their year this year, just with a bit of bad luck. But I think they'll be a top 4 team from what I know of the AFLW for at least a couple of years to come.
I think,
and
kind of like the situation that it would be for just anyone in the men's team, for any team for that fact, just getting a win in finals and having that experience under your belt goes a long way because it shows you feel all of that emotion, and then when you lose the next one, you feel that extra hunger because like you can get there and you lose straight away. You don't really have that hunger for more, but once you feel what winning feels like in finals, you want more and you feel that hunger for more. And I think if the girls can beat Port Adelaide, they'll definitely have that stronger drive going into next season if they lose the week after.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I said, although I think maybe in terms of, I think in overall top end talent, also depends too, because I know Scholes missed out last week, the Port Adelaide ruckman, very talented, probably the next best ruckman behind Mim Strong for Fremantle, one of my favourite players in the league, probably will be All-Australian ruckman by the end of it.
Yep.
But Scholes absolutely fantastic. Even last week though, whoever replaced again, I've forgotten names. But yeah, she absolutely was fit. Katie Ledecky, that's it. She was pretty great. So yeah, I will say though, in terms of like, pure top end players, I think Port maybe have the edge, but Richmond definitely have a lot more veterans who have experienced finals. So they might be able to calm things down and steady the ship if Port Adelaide get a bit of a jump, especially if it's another massive Alberton crowd. I wouldn't be surprised if that nearly sells out because I meant both Adelaide teams in the finals. They couldn't ask for anything better. Adelaide, like WA, pretty footy heavy. Their most predominant sport. So yeah, hopefully they'll have good crowds, and who knows, maybe if those lines get up, we might have a showdown final.
That would be,
but that would take a bit.
Very, very interesting.
It would be.
Well,
it would require.
We look at the road to the premiership. It would require Adelaide to beat North to make it to the prelim, and then Port to win 2 games in a row to make it a showdown prelim.
Or the other option is that Adelaide lose but still make the grand final, and Port win out.
Port make it to the grand final.
Yeah, exactly. Or Adelaide it won't happen, but I mean, it's an option.
The grand final for the AFLW moves, doesn't it? It's not a set.
Yes, I
contract?
think so. I think there are times where they've had it in states that are neutral, but I think more often than not they try and put it in the home team state.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's.
I can actually check. I've still got that.
No, go for it.
Yeah. So the venues have been Carrara for the first one, Princess Park, Adelaide Oval, Adelaide Oval, Adelaide Oval, Springfield Central Stadium. That one's for Brisbane, who were the minor premiers at that time, and Princess Park again.
Okay, so it's a possible chance of being at the Adelaide Oval, but it's also unlikely at the same time.
Oh, if it's an all Adelaide grand final.
Oh yeah, why would you not?
No. But yeah, as I said, chances are, because I think a few of those actually have gone to Melbourne because there's just more capacity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think, yeah, but again, yeah, as I said, it's just good that the premiership tends to move around. And yeah, as I said, it'll be interesting. Some of these matchups going forward could be interesting. But as I said, I don't want to put too much of a dampener on it, but I definitely see two of the prelims. I'll be very surprised if they weren't, all represented in the wait, what did I say? Sorry, all the teams from the qualifying finals end up in the prelims.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more feasible considering how strong each of those 4 teams are.
Yeah.
But again, like as you said, with Port Adelaide and with Freo, and even with to some degree with Richmond, there's still a massive roll of the dice as to whether they could make it through as well.
Yeah, as I said, Fremantle, if they can get their goal kicking sorted, like they get so many inside 50s, and their game against Hawthorn earlier in the year, they were very well in it. They just couldn't convert, and then Hawthorn just had too many times where they were able to get that fast break because there was only a few of them. Fremantle had control, but yeah, Hawthorn are just so dangerous. Out the contest if you let them. And I said Yarrapuri, again a bit untested in terms of the top team. I think they've only had one win against Essendon in the top 8. But again, through adversity they've found a way. They've gotten better as the year's gone on, and they do have some veteranship. As I said, Gemma Houghton, what a year. I loved her. She used to play for Freo. Oh, still a bit inaccurate at times, but an absolute heart and soul player. Used to go missing a bit more, but as she's gotten into a veterancy, she really leads the club. And yeah, as I said, they've got a few other players, like Window, Scholes, Ash Saint, who have really stood up this year, and O'Day when needed to be. And, when they lift, some of the youngsters can lift, and maybe they'll throw a wrench in someone's plan. Richmond, as I said, obviously have the leadership to cause a bit of trouble, but I think they're just a bit too injured. But they'll want to put the game plan in for next year, and heck, I could see them still making the prelims with a bit of luck. And yeah, Essendon, I just don't know too much about. I know Propakis is a very good player.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a real shame that Too Good isn't playing. Got injured in the first round. Couldn't get... got a few other games of the season, but then got injured again. So a bit of a shame for that. But they're a young team with a good core. So hopefully, again, they'll be looking for a first win. But yeah, as I said, as long as they keep it close, they've had a fairly respectable season.
Fair enough. Well, that pretty much wraps us all up for the AFLW talk. So I'm gonna wind us down by just kind of going over what my November plans are. So as we kind of touched on before, I'm raising money for Movember all month. It's for men's mental health research and awareness. That's something that's helped me a lot in the past couple of months. It's been something that I've definitely needed to utilize recently. And I wanted to give back to the system, because the system needs a lot of help. Granted, it's more the government side of things that's out of my jurisdiction, out of my control. But being able to at least give some money back into the system in terms of resources and funding to other places that need it is always very helpful. So my plan, what I'm essentially doing is I'm streaming on my Twitch, twitch.tv/BlazeNinjaTTV, as much as I can all through this month. I'm playing a bunch of games, doing a bunch of mini challenges within them. So like I'm touching Overwatch, Mario Kart. I might go back to Fortnite, might do some Fall Guys. I'm doing a couple of single player games as well down the line. I haven't entirely determined when I'm doing those yet, but it's been a lot of fun so far. As we've been recording this podcast, I did actually get a $100 donation from a friend of mine, which I'm very, very happy about. So my total isn't actually 155, it's now 255, which means I'm over 50% of the way to my target goal of $500. And it's only been 4 days. I'm amazed. People are so generous. Thank you all so much. So that's kind of what I'm doing. So as of we're recording this, I will be streaming tonight, pretty much every Monday, hopefully from now on until the end of the month. I won't be streaming. Granted, as of recording this, it won't matter, but I won't be streaming tomorrow night, possibly as I'm going out. Being a public holiday here, I actually have plans. It's Melbourne Cup Day.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So
another sports holiday.
It's currently a public holiday today in Tasmania. So, and I don't know why. So that's on them. But yeah, so Tuesday the 5th of November is a public holiday here. So I may stream tomorrow night. Otherwise, again, I'm gonna try and stream Wednesdays, pretty much as much as I can, but like Wednesdays, Fridays, and at least Saturdays, over on my Twitch channel, as well as again Mondays. And Tuesdays, apart from this week. Every Thursday, I go out into the city for some sea shanty sing-alongs, which are a lot of fun. Gets me out of the house, stuff like that. But yeah, so if you have any money to donate, please scan the QR code that's on screen, or go into the description and click the link that I will put down there. That takes you directly to my page, where I'm gathering all of the donations. It would mean a lot. Obviously, if you can't, financial situation, whatever, it's perfectly okay. Again, sharing awareness is also always helpful. Just sharing the link around, or just sharing directly about Movember and what they do is also very helpful. And yeah, that's pretty much all that I am up to. And I think that covers about everything that we want to talk about this week. So thank you all so much for coming and hang out with us for episode 35. Be sure to, check out our socials. Again, my Twitch channel especially, because I'm going to be super active this month. Leave a like on the podcast video on YouTube. If you want to leave us a comment, I wouldn't mind us doing a video on like some Q&A sort of stuff, whether about us or about the AFL itself and any other systems. From what it looks like, the men's draft will happen around the same time as either the prelim finals or the grand final of the AFLW. So we will probably coincide that into one video together. But we will talk about that, obviously, off podcast. Whether there'll be one next week or the week after, we don't know just yet. We will try and let you all know. But until then, thank you all so much. And hopefully we will see you all soon. Catch you later.